always thought of myself as a woman of the city, the relentless hum of traffic, the sharp scent of asphalt after rain, the vibrant pulse of life that never seemed to rest. But when I found myself standing in the doorway of my grandmother's old house, nestled in the bayou, I felt the weight of silence draping over me like a moth-eaten quilt. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet, as if they too were awakening from a long slumber. The house had seen better days. The paint peeled like sunburned skin, and the garden had surrendered to wild growth. Vines crept over the crumbling brick like fingers grasping for something lost. I had come here, or perhaps fled here, in search of solace, a place to breathe, to escape the heavy expectations of my life back in New Orleans. Yet, as I stepped inside, a shiver ran down my spine, an instinctive warning that I was not alone in this place. I dropped my bags haphazardly on the floor, the thud echoing through empty rooms. I felt the weight of countless memories, my grandmother's laughter, her stories of the bayou, of things that lurked just beyond the light. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something sweet, almost intoxicating, that I couldn't quite place. It wrapped around me, pulling me deeper into the house's embrace. As twilight descended, I ventured outside, drawn by the sounds of the swamp, a symphony of croaks and rustles, the gentle lapping of water against the banks. It was intoxicating, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt the edges of my anxiety soften. I wandered toward the water's edge, the ground squelching under my feet, the mud pulling at my shoes like a reluctant lover. That's when I first heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, sighing through the cypress trees. But as I strained to listen, I realized the cadence was something more. A voice, soft and beckoning. "Clara," it seemed to murmur, curling around my name like a snake. I shook my head, dismissing it as a figment of my imagination, but my heart raced nonetheless. I turned back toward the house, feeling the pull of curiosity tighten in my chest. The next day, I met Miss Leela, an elder of the nearby community and a self-proclaimed keeper of local lore. She shuffled up to me, her skin as weathered as the oak trees, her eyes glinting with secrets. "You're the new girl," she said, a slow grin spreading across her face, revealing teeth gnarled like roots. "You've come to hear about the statue, haven't you?" I hadn't planned on it, but the words slipped from my mouth as if they had been waiting for release. "The statue?" "Ah, yes," she nodded sagely, leaning closer as if sharing a sacred truth. "In the depths of the swamp lies a clay statue, said to be the wife of the river god. They say she whispered to those who seek her, fertility, protection, the promise of abundance for those who give her what she needs." "What does she need?" I asked, my heart thrumming with an unexplainable mixture of fear and intrigue. "A life," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Each spring, she requires a living offering. It's the price for her blessings." I felt an icy tendril of unease slither down my spine. A living offering? But why? "Long ago, she was trapped in clay," Miss Leela explained, her gaze drifting somewhere distant. "She was the river god's wife, imprisoned by jealousy, and now she yearns for connection, for the warmth of life. Some say she can bring forth children, ensure harvests, but others," her voice trailed off and a shadow crossed her face, "others say she craves more. Beware, child, the swamp takes as much as it gives." I thanked her, but I could still hear the whispers as I walked away, swirling through my mind like smoke. They called out to me, promising a kind of salvation I had never known. The thought of the statue haunted my dreams, her clay visage etched into my mind, beckoning me to seek her out, to unravel the mystery hidden in the heart of the swamp. Days passed, and I found myself drawn deeper into the swamp, each excursion fueled by a growing obsession. The air thickened with humidity and tension, the sunlight filtering through the trees and fractured beams, illuminating the muck that clung to my boots. I felt alive in this vibrant decay, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and delight. I began to notice signs, offerings left at the base of ancient trees, flowers wilting in the mud, remnants of something once living, perhaps a promise fulfilled or a deal struck. I was no longer just a visitor here. I felt tethered to these stories, to the land, and to the whispers that called out to me from the depths of the murky water. As my connection to the swamp deepened, I could no longer ignore the pull of the statue. The lines between reverence and horror began to blur, revealing a darkness that thrummed beneath the surface, waiting for me to make a choice. The whispers grew louder, and though I feared what I might find, I knew I had to confront the legend that haunted my dreams. The swamp was alive, and it was calling for me. The oppressive humidity of the bayou clung to my skin like an unwanted shroud as I made my way through the tangled underbrush. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow that danced across the gnarled roots and creeping vines. I had been in Louisiana long enough to know that this place held secrets, but I felt the weight of those secrets settle upon me like the damp earth beneath my feet. With every step, the whispers of the swamp grew louder, calling to me, pulling me deeper into their embrace. It was on one such evening that I found myself at the threshold of an old wooden shack, its paint peeling and its roof sagging, a testament to years of neglect. Mr. Lafitte, the enigmatic old-timer I had heard so much about, lived here, a man who was said to know the swamp like the back of his weathered hand. I hesitated for a moment, the air thickening around me with a sense of foreboding, before rapping my knuckles against the door. "Come in, girl," came a gravelly voice from within, laced with the rhythm of the bayou, as if he were made of the very mud that surrounded us. I pushed the door open, the creak echoing through the silence, and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by the fading light filtering through grime-covered windows. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and something else, something metallic that set my teeth on edge. Mr. Lafitte sat in a rickety chair, a tattered fishing hat pulled low over his brow. His eyes, sharp and bright against the shadows, regarded me with a mix of curiosity and caution, like an alligator sizing up its next meal. "Ah, the city girl come to learn about the swamp," he said, his voice a low rumble. "What brings you to these cursed waters?" "I'm looking for the clay statue," I admitted, the words spilling from my lips before I could reconsider. I felt foolish for even mentioning it, but the stories had captivated me, and now they clung to my thoughts like moss on a tree. Mr. Lafitte's gaze turned steely, the air in the room sickening as if the very walls held their breath. "The statue, eh? You're chasing shadows, girl. That thing, she's more than just clay. She's a keeper of secrets, a whisperer of desires." "Whispers?" I echoed, my heart quickening. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, the creaking of the chair punctuating the tension that filled the space between us. "They say she was the wife of a river god, trapped in that form by jealous spirits. And every spring, when the waters rise, she calls out to those desperate for what she can offer: fertility, protection, life. But there's a price, Clara, always a price." I swallowed hard, my skin prickling with both intrigue and dread. "What kind of price?" "Something living," he replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if the walls themselves might betray us. "A chicken, a rabbit, or worse. The swamp is hungry, and she demands it." The weight of his words settled into the marrow of my bones. I thought of the stories I had heard, the hushed tones of locals warning me against disturbing the statue. I had brushed them aside as mere folklore, but now they twisted around my mind like the vines outside, tightening with every heartbeat. "People have gone missing, you know," Mr. Lafitte continued, his gaze piercing through the shadows. "Some say they sought the statue's favor and never returned. They followed her whispers into the muck, and the swamp became their grave." I shivered, the chill of his words wrapping around me like the evening mist. "But what do you think happens to them, to those who listen?" He shrugged, the movement almost imperceptible. "The swamp doesn't give up its secrets easily. Some find what they seek, but at what cost? Others, they become part of the whispers, lost to the mud, their voices joining the chorus of the damned." For a moment, I was silent, grappling with the enormity of his revelations. The allure of the statue's promises had seemed so innocent at first, but now it felt like a dark abyss, one that threatened to swallow me whole if I ventured too close. My thoughts drifted to the stories of infertility and loss that haunted the families in the neighboring towns, the desperate prayers whispered into the night. "Why do you tell me this?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You could have just told me to leave it be." Mr. Lafitte's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, revealing a flicker of something almost human beneath the hardened exterior. "Because, Clara, the swamp is alive. It knows your heart. It knows your desires, and it will toy with them until you're nothing but a shadow of yourself. I've seen too many fall prey to its charms." As I left the shack, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced along the water's edge. The whispers of the swamp beckoned to me still, but a new sense of caution gnawed at my insides. I was no longer just a seeker of solace. I was now a player in a game far more sinister than I had ever imagined. And as I stepped deeper into the bayou, I felt the weight of my choices looming ahead, the whispers growing louder with each heartbeat, promising me everything, yet warning me of the darkness that lay just beneath the surface. As the last vestiges of winter slipped away, the swamps awakened in a chorus of sounds, croaking frogs, rustling leaves, and the gentle lapping of water against the banks. I could feel the pull of the clay statue deep within the heart of the bayou, its whispers growing louder with each passing day. I had spent countless evenings on the porch, the air thick with humidity and the scent of earth, pondering the tales Mr. Lafitte had shared with me. The promise of fertility and protection danced in my mind like fireflies in the dusk, tempting me to act on the whispers that had settled like a fog over my thoughts. The traditions surrounding the statue were as intricate as the veins of the swamp itself. I learned that each spring, the locals would make offerings, small creatures, a gesture of gratitude for the blessings of the earth. As the warmth of the sun began to kiss the horizon, I felt an insatiable urge to participate, to become part of this ancient ritual. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, igniting a flicker of anxiety in my chest. That day, I wandered through my grandmother's overgrown garden, tangled vines and wildflowers bursting forth with life. I could hear the distant call of a crow as I trailed my fingers along the rough bark of an oak, contemplating what offering was worthy enough for the whispers that beckoned me. My heart raced as I thought of the small creatures that scurried about, the rabbits and the birds that had made their home alongside the old house. I felt a strange connection to the land, as if it were alive and breathing, urging me to make my choice. As evening fell, I found myself standing in front of the statue, its weathered form half buried in the mud, cloaked in shadows. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made the hairs on my arms stand at attention. The whispers seemed to swirl around me, a soft and haunting melody that tugged at my core. I closed my eyes, allowing the sounds of the swamp to envelop me, and I could almost see her, the river god's wife, her face twisted in longing and despair. "Clara," the whisper seemed to call, wrapping around my name like a lover's embrace. "Clara, come to me." I opened my eyes, my breath catching in my throat. The statue loomed before me, its cracked clay features glistening in the fading light. And for a moment, I felt a deep sorrow for this ancient being, trapped in her earthen prison. I wanted to help her, to free her from the shackles of the swamp that held her captive. But what would it cost me? I took a step closer, the mud squelching beneath my feet, and I could feel the weight of tradition pressing down on my shoulders. The tales I had heard echoed in my mind. An offering of life, Clara, that is what she desires. I could almost hear Mr. Lafitte's gravelly voice as he spoke, his eyes glinting with the knowledge of things better left unspoken. Determined, I turned away from the statue, my mind racing. The decision hung heavy in the air, an invisible weight that made my heart pound. I needed to make my offering before the last light of day disappeared. I had no idea what I was truly inviting into my life, but the thought of prosperity, of renewal, was intoxicating. I made my way back to the garden, my heart hammering in my chest. I spotted a small rabbit nibbling on the last remnants of winter's grass, oblivious to my intentions. It felt wrong, but as I crept closer, the whispers returned, urging me on, wrapping around my thoughts like a vine. It is just a sacrifice, I told myself, trying to justify the act, a small one for a greater good. I caught the rabbit, its soft body trembling in my hands, and I could feel its heart racing, mirroring my own. In that moment, I felt the weight of the world settle upon me, the ancient rituals, the pulse of the earth, the whispers in the mud. I held the creature close, feeling its warmth, and I could almost hear the statue calling to me, drawing me back to her. With shaking hands, I returned to the edge of the swamp, the shadows deepening with each step I took. The air was thick with anticipation, the moon casting an eerie glow upon the water. As I knelt before the statue, I offered the rabbit, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. The whispers crescendoed, filling the air with a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. "Accept this offering," I murmured, my voice barely a whisper, "and grant me your protection." As the rabbit was lowered into the muddy embrace of the statue, I felt a chill pass through me, a gust of wind that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. The whisper swelled, wrapping around me like a shroud, and in that moment, I knew I had awakened something ancient and sinister. The statue's gaze seemed to lock onto mine, and I shuddered, realizing that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The whisper sang louder now, a cacophony of voices that promised me everything I had ever wanted. But deep inside, I could feel the stirrings of dread. As I rose from my knees, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had not just offered a creature to the statue, but a part of myself, a piece of my soul forever entwined with the dark secrets of the swamp. The swamp had begun to change since I made that offering. The air thickened with a damp, cloying sweetness that clung to my skin. I spent my days haunted by the whispers of the clay statue, those soft, beckoning words that curled around my mind like tendrils of smoke. I could almost hear her voice now, low and soothing, threading through the rustling leaves and the distant croaks of frogs. But in the quiet moments, when the sun sank low and shadows stretched across the bayou, I felt an unsettling chill run down my spine. As I moved through the tangled underbrush, I couldn't shake the feeling that the swamp was watching me. The cypress trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots jutting out from the earth like fingers grasping for something lost. I often found myself in a trance, staring at the murky water, half expecting to see the statue rise from its depths, her clay form glistening with moisture, her eyes pleading. I thought of Mr. Lafitte's words, those grave warnings about the price one must pay for the goddess's favor. But the lure of fertility, the promise of protection, was seducing me deeper into the embrace of the swamp. It was during one of those twilight hours that I first experienced a vision, a vivid flash that seized my breath. I was standing by the water, the air thick with humidity, when the ground beneath me began to tremble. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a cacophony of voices, each one pleading, each one a thread woven into the fabric of my mind. "Help me," they seemed to say. And in that moment, I was not just Clara, the city girl seeking solace. I was a witness to her despair. I saw her, an ethereal figure trapped within the clay, her expression twisted in agony. I felt her longing, the ache of separation from her husband, the river god who had imprisoned her for reasons I could only guess. "Please," I murmured, reaching out toward the vision, my heart racing. "What do you want from me?" The figure's mouth twisted into a silent scream, and the water around me began to bubble as if the swamp itself was alive with rage. Suddenly, the vision receded, and I was left gasping, my heart pounding against my ribs. The whispers faded into the hush of the bayou, leaving me cold and shivering. The next day, I ventured to the old cypress grove where the statue was said to rest. I felt inexplicably drawn to it, a moth to the flame. The sun cast long shadows as I walked, and a heavy weight settled on my chest. I had always thought of myself as a rational person, but the allure of the statue tugged at something primal within me, something that whispered of hope and desperation. "Clara?" a voice called out, breaking my reverie. It was Mr. Lafitte, his figure emerging from the underbrush like a ghost. "You should not be here." "I need to know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "What did I awaken?" He stepped closer, his eyes dark pools of worry. "You've stirred the waters, child. The offering you made was not just a gesture, it was a pact. The statue craves more than mere trinkets. She seeks life. Each spring, she demands a living sacrifice to truly grant her gifts. And you, Clara, must now reckon with the echoes of your choice." His words washed over me, cold and unyielding. I felt myself trembling, the weight of my decision pressing down like the humid air that surrounded us. "But I choked on my thoughts, unable to voice the hope I had clung to. Mr. Lafitte shook his head slowly. Hope can be a dangerous thing when intertwined with the unknown. You must tread carefully. The whispers will grow louder, and the consequences will deepen. As the days passed, the swamp grew increasingly hostile. The vibrant life that once surrounded me felt tainted, as if the very essence of the land had shifted. The frogs croaked in dissonance, and the wind carried a scent of decay. I could no longer tell where the whispers of the statue ended and my own fears began. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt a presence looming over me. I sat up, heart racing, and saw a figure at the foot of my bed, a silhouette framed by the pale moonlight. The whispers came alive, swirling through the room as the figure beckoned me closer. "Come," it seemed to whisper, a seductive lull that wrapped around my thoughts. I stumbled back against the wall, my breath quickening. The figure flickered like a candle in the wind, and I realized it was the statue, her anguished face twisted in a silent plea. "What do you want?" I cried, my voice breaking. "I've given you what you asked for." But the statue remained still, her eyes filled with a haunting sorrow. The whispers intensified, and I could feel the swamp's heartbeat echoing in my chest, the price of my desperate aspirations reverberating through the very marrow of my bones. In that moment, I understood the truth. The price of protection was not merely a living sacrifice, but the very essence of my own humanity. As the whispers enveloped me, I realized I was being drawn into a darkness from which I might never escape, a darkness born from the very mud that promised life. And so, I sat in the shadows, trembling, waiting for dawn, knowing that the true cost of my choices was only just beginning to reveal itself. The sun had begun to sink beneath the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the murky waters of the swamp. The air was thick with a palpable tension, a weight that pressed down upon my chest, making each breath feel like a laborious task. I stood at the water's edge, the chilling whispers of the clay statue curling around me like a tendril of fog. It was calling, beckoning me closer, and the pull was almost magnetic. Each spring, the locals whispered about the statue, about how it demanded life in exchange for its blessings. Yet, after my first offering, a small creature, innocent and trembling, I had become ensnared by its promises. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, weaving through my thoughts and dreams, painting my desires in shades of desperation and dread. Now I stood on the precipice of choice, to sever the thread binding me to this ancient horror, or to embrace the darkness that had begun to seep into my very being. "Clara?" The voice that broke through my reverie was soft but steady. It was Mr. Lafitte, the old-timer with the sunken eyes that held the weight of many stories. He emerged from the shadows, his silhouette wreathed in the fading light, the swamp's reflection flickering like a candle in the wind. "You shouldn't be here, not at this hour." "I have to know," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have to understand what it wants." His face contorted with a mixture of concern and grief. "Understanding comes with a price, child," he warned, stepping closer. "Sometimes it demands more than you're willing to give." I could feel the statue's whispers intertwining with my thoughts, a seductive melody that promised safety, abundance, and the life I so desperately craved. "But I've already given it something," I replied, almost pleadingly. "What more could it possibly want?" "More than you can imagine," he said, his gaze drifting to the water, where the last rays of sunlight shimmered ominously. "It hungers, Clara, and in the swamp, hunger has a way of twisting love into something unrecognizable." As he spoke, the air grew colder, and the shadows deepened, swallowing the light around us. I could feel the statue's presence, a weight against my soul, urging me to listen, to heed its call. I took a step toward the water, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and yearning. "What if I don't offer anything this time?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if I just walk away?" Mr. Lafitte reached out, his gnarled hand grasping my wrist with surprising strength. "Then you'll be leaving behind a part of yourself, Clara. The whispers will not fade. They will follow you, haunting your every step. And the swamp, it won't let you go so easily." I felt my resolve waver as I gazed into the murky depths. The whispers swirled like a haunting lullaby, promising protection from the world beyond these swamps, from the pain of loss and the ache of longing. I thought of my grandmother, of her gentle hands that once cradled life, and the story she told me of the clay statue, of a love that transcended death but demanded its own toll. "Please don't do this," Mr. Lafitte implored, his voice a low rumble in the growing darkness. "You don't understand what you're inviting into your life." But I did understand. I felt it in the marrow of my bones, the intoxicating allure of power, the promise of fertility, the whispers that twisted around my heart like vine and thorn. It was more than just a statue. It was a gateway to something primal, something that clung to the very essence of life. "I need it," I whispered, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. With that, I knelt at the water's edge, the murky depths reflecting the last glimmers of twilight. The whispers intensified, a chorus of voices urging me to fulfill the ancient pact that bound me. My heart raced as I turned my gaze back to Mr. Lafitte, whose expression was a mix of sorrow and resignation. "Then you must make your choice," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of warning. "But remember, Clara, the river god's wife does not give without taking. You will be bound to her, and the price will be steep." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of acceptance wash over me as I reached into the pocket of my coat, where I had kept a small offering, a tiny living creature. The whispers crescendoed around me, filling the air with an electric charge, as if the very swamp were holding its breath. As I placed the offering into the water, the darkness seemed to surge forward, swallowing the last remnants of light. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, a haunting symphony that promised everything I desired, while the deepest shadows of the swamp writhed and twisted, eager to claim their due. In that moment, I felt the weight of my decision settle deep within my soul, a whisper of dread echoing through the stillness. I had chosen the path of the whispers, and now I would have to navigate the chilling waters between reverence and horror, forever entwined with the fate of the clay statue and the river god's wife who still whispered from the mud.